Good evening, wanderer of stories. Find a comfortable spot, allow your shoulders to soften, and let the steady rhythm of your breath guide you towards stillness. Tonight, we drift back nearly 7 centuries to fields furrowed beneath a pewter-coloured sky, where the unbroken persistence of medieval peasants carried an entire kingdom upon weary backs. While you settle in, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy my work. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what hour glows on your clock. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. As the world outside your window eases into darkness, imagine yourself standing at the edge of a broad green commons. A faint wind moves through rows of barley, each stalk swaying like a metronome set to the unhurried tempo of the rural year. Far off, a church bell tolls, a single, resonant note that once measured out labour, faith, and obligation in equal parts. Congratulations. You've just woken up in the year 1387. The good news? You're still breathing. The bad news? Every breath tastes like stale smoke and goat fart. Your eyelids flutter open to the familiar ceiling of your drafty wattle and daub hut, a ceiling that thoughtfully drips condensation directly onto your forehead. It's dawn, though you'd barely call this pale, shivering light sunrise. It's more like the sky gave up trying to cheer anyone up. Your bed is a straw mat with lumps sharp enough to qualify as medieval acupuncture. Fleas scatter as you shift, which at least means you're providing housing for some. The air inside your one-room home is thick with the scent of old sweat, unwashed wool, and the gentle ammonia perfume of your communal chamber pot. You'd crack a window to air things out, but joke's on you. Windows are a luxury reserved for the church and nobility. You have a hole in the wall stuffed with rags, which is basically medieval double glazing. You try to stretch. Bad idea. Your back protests with a series of cracks louder than a dry branch in a fireplace. You're 27, practically geriatric in peasant years, and your joints ache with the familiar promise of a day spent ploughing fields. Your first chore? Hauling your grumbling body outside before your father's goats decide to chew your hair again. Because yes, they sleep inside with you. Everyone does. Your siblings, the goats, your uncle who refuses to leave, and a spider the size of a toddler who's become something of a pet. Stepping outside into the pre-dawn fog, you're greeted by the crisp aroma of damp earth and cow pies. The village is still quiet except for distant rooster shrieks. Roosters who, incidentally, seem to take sadistic pleasure in waking you 2 hours earlier than needed. As you shuffle past your neighbour's hut, you notice old Thomas already knee-deep in mud, cursing at an ox that refuses to move. It's oddly comforting knowing everyone else is just as miserable. You reach the fields as the first pink sliver of sun slices the horizon. The soil is already frozen solid in patches, each step a reminder that winter is only one bad harvest away. You sigh, grab your wooden plough, and hitch it to the family's sole ox. Bertha, who has the personality of a sullen brick, she glares at you like she knows you'll whip her tail if she slows down, which you will, because you have roughly 12 acres of stubborn dirt to turn over before dusk. Your hands wrap around the plough's splintered handles, which leave you with new blisters every day, as if your palms are collecting medieval merit badges. You lean your whole weight into it, your boots squelching through clumps of old manure and clay. The plough blade wobbles like it was forged by a drunken blacksmith, and each stone buried in the soil sends a jolt up your spine. You silently curse the rocks, the ox, the sun, your lord, and most of all, the cosmic joke that is peasant life. The rhythmic creak of wood, the occasional fart from Bertha, and your own ragged breathing are the soundtrack to your morning. You think longingly of modern office chairs, espresso machines, even the existential despair of corporate PowerPoint meetings. Anything would beat this medieval CrossFit routine. As you slog across the furrows, time becomes slippery. Hours blend into each other, measured only by the increasing ache in your arms and the angry red blisters sprouting on your fingers. Occasionally, you pause to wipe snot on your sleeve, but the cold air immediately crystallizes it into a frozen stalactite hanging from your nose. You wonder how much longer until breakfast, a thin bowl of pottage that tastes like wet cardboard and regret. But first, you must finish the morning's stretch of field. You pass your neighbour's son, a scrawny boy of 6, already stooped with a basket of rocks pulled from the soil. He gives you a gap-toothed grin. and a wave that says, "Isn't it wonderful we're both stuck in this eternal mud pit?" You wave back, knowing full well neither of you will live long enough to grow old. When you glance up, the sun is crawling higher, golden light revealing the frost still crusted on the far side of the field. You almost admire its beauty, until Bertha takes a dump directly on your boots. You sigh. The cycle continues. Plough, step, curse, repeat. The ploughing feels endless. You push your body until your muscles burn and your vision blurs. There's no choice. If you don't prepare the fields, there's no grain. And if there's no grain, there's no hope of surviving the coming winter. Or the bailiffs who'll be by soon enough to claim the lion's share for your lord's table. Your mind drifts as you trudge. You fantasize about a hot shower, a mattress with actual springs, a heated blanket. But the closest you'll ever get to warmth is falling asleep near the hearth, hoping you don't roll into the fire in your sleep. As the sun reaches its peak, you pause, breathless and trembling, staring at the rough patch you still have left. Your stomach growls so loudly, even Bertha flicks an ear in disapproval. The knowledge that everything you're growing will mostly go to your feudal overlords sits in your chest heavier than the plough. But for now, there's no time to dwell. You pull the plough handles once more, feeling the deep groove in your soul widen with every furrow. Around you, the village comes alive, mothers calling children, men shouting to each other across the fields, crows circling overhead, waiting for something, anything, to die. You realize it's not even noon yet. The sun hovers overhead, a pale coin in a washed-out sky, as you stagger back to your hovel to snatch a midday meal. You might think this is a well-earned break, but don't get comfortable, because here come the bailiffs, trundling up the road with all the subtlety of a marching band. You spot them by their wide-brimmed hats, suspiciously clean boots, and the way they swing their ledgers like weapons of mass depression. They arrive at your field with a triumphant creak of saddle leather, smirking at the sight of you, sweaty, mud-caked, and already half-broken by the day's labour. Their horses are the only creatures in this village who get to eat well year-round. One of the bailiffs hops off, his belly jiggling like the village pudding you haven't tasted in months, and unfurls a scroll longer than your ox's tail. He announces, in a nasal tone that makes you want to drop the plough and cry, that Lord Ethelbert's tax is due today. You nod, knowing refusal isn't an option. The Lord's grain stores must be filled before you think of feeding your own family. You try to hide your panic as they open your grain sacks, because you know they will take the best of what little you have. Their hands dig through your harvest like greedy raccoons rummaging a trash bin. Each fistful they seize feels like a chunk of your winter survival slipping away. They weigh and measure the grain with rusty scales that always seem to lean suspiciously in their favour. One bailiff jokes about how your barley is just good enough to keep the pigs alive, and they both laugh, a dark, braying sound that matches the crows cawing overhead. A few neighbours gather nearby, trying to look busy so they don't draw attention. No one wants to catch a bailiff's eye today. It's like medieval dodgeball, but instead of a rubber ball, the penalty is hunger, and possibly a public flogging if you talk back. They finish with you, but not before scribbling notes in their ledger and taking an extra scoop for transport losses. You know exactly where those losses end up, at the bailiff's own dinner tables. The grains of your labour, painstakingly planted and nurtured under rain and frost, now padding the pockets of men who've never even dirtied their hands with a hoe. As they leave, the bailiffs give you one last backward glance, a smirk of power that says, "Remember who owns you. You know they'll be back next season, and the one after that," until your back gives out, or you slip face first into a pile of frozen dung. It's not just your fate, it's your father's fate, and your grandfather's before him. The same cycle of planting, harvesting, and paying taxes until your bones are part of the very soil you tilled. The silence after their departure is louder than their jeers. You look at your wife, who's been watching from the doorway with a child on her hip, her face set like stone. She doesn't cry. She hasn't got the tears left to spare. Together, you both know tonight's pottage will be even thinner. But there's no time for despair. The sun is still high, and the fields aren't going to plough themselves. You swallow the knot in your throat, wipe the sweat from your brow, and drag your weary body back into the fields. Each step feels heavier now, your muscles weighted not only by exhaustion but by the knowledge that most of today's effort will feed someone else. The afternoon passes in a blur of rhythmic misery, the scrape of the plough, the suck of mud against your boots, the raw rasp of your breathing. You keep your eyes down, afraid that if you look up, you'll see the bailiff's horses vanishing over the hill, carrying your winter's hope in their saddlebags. Time moves like a drunken snail. By late afternoon, you're so hungry you consider chewing the leather strap of your belt. You fantasize about roasted meat, fresh bread, maybe a wheel of cheese, foods that exist only in the imaginations of peasants and the kitchens of castles. Your stomach grumbles so violently that Bertha the ox actually startles. As dusk begins to paint the horizon with strokes of grey and purple, you hear the muted conversations of neighbours gathering their tools. You trudge home alongside them, the village road, a ribbon of churned mud. Each footfall splashes icy water onto your raw ankles. You look around and see the same resigned expressions mirrored on every face. Everyone has paid, everyone has lost. In the distance, the church bell tolls vespers, calling the village to evening prayers. Its mournful clang reminds you that the bailiffs may have taken your grain, but soon the church will want its share as well. You'd laugh at the cosmic joke if you weren't too tired to exhale. You reach your hut just as the last light fades. The door creaks open, and warm, smoky air greets you. Your family huddles near the hearth, the meagre flames illuminating worried eyes. You sit down on the dirt floor, your body one giant bruise of fatigue. For now, there's a brief, brittle comfort in being home, even if the air tastes like boiled onions and desperation. Tomorrow, you know, the cycle will begin again. The plough, the bailiffs, the endless exchange of sweat for survival. But tonight, at least, you're still here. You'll close your eyes and pray the winter won't be as cruel as the men who took your grain. The first real snow comes in late November, swirling down from a sky the colour of wet wool. You wake up to find your village hushed under a blanket of white that glows with deceptive serenity. It almost looks beautiful, until the wind cuts through the cracks in your hut like a dagger, reminding you this beauty is here to kill you. Your breath hangs in the air like ghostly ribbons as you pull yourself from your straw mat. The fire has died in the night, leaving the hearth an icy monument to your poverty. You fumble for a piece of last summer's wood, but the pile is low. Every log burned is a gamble. Keep warm now or risk freezing later. You decide to light it. There's no point surviving the season if you're already a popsicle. The days are short, but the nights feel endless. Snowdrifts block the paths between huts, and every morning brings a new layer of frost on the inside of your walls. By now, the pottage pot is more wishful thinking than sustenance. Thin, sour, and suspiciously chewy. You find yourself staring at your last onion like it's a sacred relic. Some nights, the hunger gnaws so fiercely you dream of roasted fowl so vivid you wake up chewing your blanket. Food stores dwindle alarmingly fast. The grain that wasn't seized by the bailiffs now sits in a locked chest, portioned out in miserly handfuls. The rest of your meals come from turnips that have sprouted suspicious blue patches, stale bread hard enough to chisel stone, and the occasional scrawny rabbit, if you're lucky enough to catch one, and lucky enough that the Lord's game warden doesn't catch you. Every evening, your family gathers around the hearth, counting how many days of food remain. It's like a grim advent calendar. Behind each day is another hollow belly and another chance for despair. Your wife speaks little now, saving her energy. Your children grow thin and quiet. Their eyes seem too big for their faces, wide and glassy as they stare at the pot simmering with the same watery gruel night after night. Some neighbours try to barter for food, an old cloak for a sack of barley, a wooden spoon for a handful of beans. Others simply vanish into the woods, desperate enough to risk the forest's wolves in search of mushrooms or half-rotted roots. You know some won't return, but everyone pretends they might, because hope is the only luxury left. You spend your days patching holes in the roof with frozen mud, chopping wood with a rusted hatchet, and praying the snow will melt before your family's stomachs do. On rare sunny afternoons, you go out with your neighbours to clear snow from the paths, but the air is so cold your nostrils freeze shut, and every breath burns like you're inhaling 1,000 tiny knives. The dark humour of it all is that the church bells still ring every morning, as if there's something to celebrate. You imagine the priest in his warm rectory, munching on the tithes he collected, eggs, cheese, even salted meat. Meanwhile, your children suck on stale bread crusts like they're the most precious candies in Christendom. At night, the village seems haunted. Wind howls through the alleys, rattling shutters and moaning like a chorus of hungry ghosts. You lie awake listening to your family's soft whimpers, feeling every growl of your stomach like a personal failure. In the dark, your mind wanders to what it would feel like to just sleep and never wake up. You shake the thought away. It's dangerous to think that way when winter still has months left. Sometimes, you remember summer days in the fields, when the sun beat down so hard you prayed for a breeze. You'd give anything now for that heat, that brightness, even the relentless bugs. Anything to stop the cold from eating its way into your bones. One morning, you wake to find your neighbor's old dog curled up stiff and lifeless by their door, frozen where it lay. The children whisper about it, eyes wide with the realization that life here can simply end overnight. You help your neighbor dig a shallow grave in the hard earth, your breath mingling in the frigid air as you work in silence. But the worst isn't the hunger. It's the knowledge that winter's teeth are only half bared. Storms still rumble on the horizon, and each day without food brings your family one step closer to becoming another sad story, whispered around the hearths next spring. Through it all, you force yourself to keep moving, gathering what little firewood you can, patching leaks with frozen straw, checking the grain stores as if staring at them will make them fill up again. Every small task is an act of defiance against a season designed to kill you. And every night, you fall asleep hoping that tomorrow, the snow will thaw just enough to give you a fighting chance. Dawn breaks with the hollow clang of the church bell, a sound you've come to dread almost as much as the bailiff's knock. But today isn't just any day, it's tithe collection day. The priest arrives like clockwork, his robes flapping dramatically in the wind, as if God himself needed extra flair. Behind him trudge two altar boys carrying baskets already lined with straw, because nothing says divine love like taking eggs from the starving. You stand outside your hovel, clutching a wicker basket containing the last of your hen's reluctant offerings. The eggs are small, brittle, and the shells freckled with dirt. Still, they're your most precious treasure, a tiny bit of protein that could have meant a rare, warm meal for your children. Instead, they're headed straight into the priest's basket. The priest greets you with a smile so thin it could slice cheese. He blesses your home with a perfunctory wave of his hand, which you suspect is less about divine favor and more about shooing the fleas. Then he recites the same line he's given your father, your grandfather, and every peasant since time immemorial. Render unto God what is God's. You hand over your tithe, 10% of your eggs, which in your case means nearly all of them, since your hens stopped laying much once the cold set in. The priest weighs them with the air of a man measuring gold, nods, and drops them into his basket with a self-satisfied thunk. The altar boys exchange glances. One looks vaguely apologetic, the other more interested in the shape of his own nose. He doesn't ask if your children have enough to eat. He doesn't ask if your fields yielded anything. He doesn't ask if you have firewood or blankets. He simply makes a note in his ledger, the neat lines of ink recording your contribution to the church's coffers. Your family's hunger becomes another tick on a page that will be read only by the priest and God, and you're not entirely sure either of them care. As he moves on to your neighbor's hovel, you watch him take eggs, a wheel of cheese, a cured ham. Each time the villagers bow their heads in resigned submission. It's a travelling roadshow of religious extortion, but with none of the music or jugglers. You know the priest isn't rich by noble standards, but he lives warmer and eats better than anyone in the village, all because he stands closest to the Almighty's pocketbook. A gust of wind sweeps through, carrying with it the scent of manure, wood smoke, and desperation. You pull your tattered cloak tighter, eyes stinging not from cold, but from the rage you have to swallow. Because questioning the tithe isn't just bad manners, it's dangerous. Heretics don't last long in these parts. People remember what happened to the miller's cousin who muttered something about church greed. The rumours say they found him floating face, down in the marsh, his pockets mysteriously empty. When the priest finishes his rounds, he heads back toward the church, baskets overflowing with offerings. The bell tolls again, a cheerful peal that rings hollow across the frozen fields. It's a reminder to gather for Mass, because after taking your food, the church would also like your time. Inside the church, the air is slightly warmer but thick with the smell of damp wool, old incense, and unwashed bodies. You shuffle in with the rest of the villagers, knees stiff from hours spent in the snow. You kneel on the cold stone floor, trying not to think about the hollow ache in your belly. The priest stands before the altar, preaching about charity and kindness, his hands soft and well-fed as they lift the chalice. He speaks of heaven's rewards, of the importance of sacrifice. His words echo beautifully against the vaulted ceiling, each phrase as carefully polished as the silver crucifix behind him. But you can't help noticing his cheeks are rosy with health, his waist thick with abundance. The eggs you surrendered weigh on your mind like stones. The knowledge that your children's dinner has been traded for a promise of eternal salvation feels like a bitter joke. As Mass ends, you leave the church with the others, shuffling back into the snow under a sky that has turned a steely grey. The priest stands by the doorway, offering blessings in exchange for coins, though you suspect most of those blessings are as empty as your larder. You trudge home, your footsteps muffled by the snow, each step a reminder of the cosmic absurdity of it all. You toil endlessly, you give up what little you have, and you're still told it's not enough to earn divine favour. But you keep moving, because stopping means freezing, starving, or both. By the time you reach your hovel, dusk is falling again, the horizon painted in bruised purples and sullen reds. You slip inside, greeted by the wide eyes of your children, who ask if there's supper. You smile weakly, ruffle their hair, and stir the pot of pottage that's more water than anything else. The sound of your wooden spoon scraping the pot is the only music in the house. Tonight, you'll pray a little harder, if only because you've paid so dearly for the privilege. Snow still crusts the ground when the first hints of spring arrive. Mud replaces ice, and the village becomes a slushy morass of thawing dung, dead grass, and hope. The air smells marginally less like misery and more like wet dirt, which is, in medieval terms, practically a bouquet of roses. But as the days lengthen, you know the cycle is about to begin again. Fields need ploughing, taxes loom, and every sunrise comes with a new opportunity to starve. You haul yourself outside, joints popping like a medieval percussion section. The sun is brighter but carries no warmth. You feel it on your back as you stoop to mend a broken fence, your hands numb from mornings that still flirt with frostbite. Your ox, Bertha, stands nearby, chewing what might generously be called grass, more accurately, a patch of greenish mud, her eyes as glassy as yours. By midday, the village comes alive with nervous energy. Neighbours gather to exchange news of who survived winter and who didn't. You count the absences, each missing face a silent testimony to the season's brutal accounting. Rumours fly of distant villages where the cold took entire families, of grain stores so empty even the rats packed up and left. You'd think spring's arrival would be a cause for celebration, but here it's more like an anxious pause before the next blow, because soon the bailiffs will return to assess your new crop's potential. The priest will start hinting about additional offerings for Easter Mass. Lambs, if you have them. Coins, if you don't. And should you miraculously avoid illness, injury, or famine, there's always the annual just because tax the Lord dreams up when he's bored. The unrelenting treadmill of survival continues. Plant, weed, harvest, pay, repeat. Each season takes a piece of you. Summer bakes you until your skin blisters. Autumn demands a race against the dying light to bring in the harvest. Winter starves you. And spring demands you rise again, no matter how ragged you feel. There's a humorless absurdity to it all, like being the punchline of a joke you never volunteered for. You imagine a modern person arriving here, armed with quinoa recipes and a Fitbit, and laugh so hard you nearly sprain your lungs. This world would chew them up faster than a rat on a stale crust. Yet somehow, between the endless toil and the predatory taxes, there are moments of stubborn joy. Your children giggling as they chase each other around a mud puddle. The brief peace of a still dawn, when the mist makes everything look soft. The warmth of your wife's hand in yours on a rare evening when everyone else sleeps. As the months pass, the village moves in rhythm with the land. Weddings happen, babies are born, elders die quietly in smoky huts. You plant seeds and try not to think about whether you'll be here to see them harvested. Because in medieval life, plans are something for God, the Lord, and the weather to laugh at. Some nights, You gather with neighbors around a flickering fire, swapping stories of a better world, of kings who don't bleed their peasants dry, of lands without wolves or famines, of days when you can eat until you're full. You know they're fantasies, but dreaming costs nothing. And in this world, that makes it the cheapest entertainment available. You've learned to find solace in the smallest comforts, the feel of warm goat's milk on your tongue, the fleeting heat of the hearth before it sputters out, the rough weight of your child asleep in your lap. These are what keep you going, more than any sermon or lordly decree. As the year draws to a close, you look back and marvel that you're still alive. Your family huddles around you, a little thinner, a little wearier, but breathing. The plough stands ready, the ox dozes, the fields wait. Another cycle begins. You know the taxes will come, the bailiffs will sneer, the priest will demand, the weather will threaten, but so will dawn, so will the chance, however slim, that this year might be kinder. You cling to that foolish hope because it's the one thing no one, not even the Lord or the church, can tax out of you. So you breathe in the cold, sweet air of early spring, brush the dirt from your hands, and take one more step forward into the never-ending dance of survival. Because in medieval Europe, enduring isn't just what you do, it's who you are. Now, you've just woken up in the year 1381, which, by medieval standards, is like stumbling into the middle of a bar fight you didn't start. The first thing you notice is the sour stink of unwashed bodies, layered with the even sourer stink of unwashed sheep, because your village has both in abundance. Outside your wooden hut, dawn is creeping over the frostbitten fields, but something else hangs in the air. An electric charge of barely contained fury. You drag yourself from your straw pallet, brushing off fleas that scatter like tiny revolutionaries. Your bones creak like they've been used as percussion instruments by trolls. As you pull on your tunic, stiff with old sweat, you hear it, murmurs drifting through the village like smoke. Names like John Ball and Wat Tyler whispered between neighbours, eyes darting like mice near a cat. The talk is of taxes, poll taxes to be exact. A gleefully evil invention demanding payment from everyone, rich or poor, adult or child. If you have a pulse, you owe the king. You shuffle outside to find a knot of villagers near the well. Their faces, half hidden under hoods and grimy hair, twist in shared outrage. An old man with teeth like medieval gravestones mutters, "3 times now we've paid, each time more than before." A woman balancing a baby on one hip spits into the dirt. "They tax us just for existing." Another villager waves a scrap of parchment in the air. An official notice from the royal collectors, its ink still fresh with contempt. Your neighbour, Giles the Thatcher, is red-faced with rage and barley ale. He bellows, "Why do we sweat and bleed if the king can just take our lives coin by coin?" The crowd murmurs agreement. A few fists raise. Someone jokes, darkly, that soon the king will tax the air itself, and everyone laughs, a bitter laugh that turns quickly into silence. The poll tax collectors, backed by the church and the crown, have become travelling nightmares. Men who stride into cottages like they own them, tallying children, dogs, and chickens, then demanding coins peasants don't have. If you don't pay, they seize what they can. A pot, a cloak, your only decent chicken. If you resist, they beat you or worse. Nobody's forgotten the stories of women stripped and humiliated for questioning the taxman. Your stomach clenches with hunger. You realize breakfast is the stale heel of bread left from last night's meal. But rage is more filling than food today. By midday, villagers gather again in the green, drawn by whispers that something must be done. You stand shoulder to shoulder with farmers, weavers, smiths, and shepherds. Everyone from the village who's ever been fleeced by the local lord. The gossip is that down in Kent, a man named Wat Tyler is rallying peasants to march on London itself. The absurdity of the thought sends a shiver of hope through the crowd. A ragged army of villagers storming the richest city in England. You'd laugh if you weren't already halfway convinced it might actually happen, because something inside you has snapped. The knowledge that no amount of ploughing, praying, or paying will ever be enough for the people who claim to own you. You remember how the bailiff took your last sack of barley last winter. How your neighbour's wife wept when the collector demanded a tax on their dead child. Because yes, the taxman charged for souls who'd never drawn breath. The rage swells in your chest like a storm tide. As dusk falls, you sit with your family around a meager fire. Your wife stares into the flames, eyes hollow but bright with something unfamiliar. Determination. Your oldest son, barely 12, asks if it's true the peasants are going to march. You hesitate, then nod. "Aye," you say softly. "They're going to march." That night, as the village settles into uneasy sleep, you lie awake listening to the winter wind whistle through the gaps in your walls. But the howling doesn't drown out the new pulse in the air, a heartbeat of defiance, pounding louder with every whispered word passed from hut to hut. You know dawn will bring more than another day of toil. It will bring a choice: stay and starve, or rise and risk everything. You wake before dawn, not from the rooster's shriek, but the sound of feet crunching frozen earth outside your hovel. Voices murmur, sharp with excitement. You throw off your flea-riddled blanket and pull on your boots, which are basically leather socks one bad day away from disintegrating. When you step outside, you see them. Dozens of your neighbours, cloaked in ragged wool and resolve, gathered in the pale light of a frosty morning. Old Giles, normally asleep in a puddle of ale at this hour, is strapping a pitchfork to his back like it's Excalibur. Beside him, Agnes the Weaver ties bundles of stale bread to her belt, provisions for a journey no one has planned with any precision. Children clutch sticks like swords, faces lit with the giddy terror of knowing they're about to break every rule they've been taught. At the centre of this ramshackle assembly stands a man with a short sword, and the kind of voice that makes your bones want to obey. Wat Tyler himself. His eyes burn like embers as he calls for everyone to gather close. "No more taxes," he shouts, and the words ripple outward like a stone dropped in a still pond. You feel your pulse quicken. Around you, farmers, blacksmiths, shepherds, men and women who've only known submission, stand taller than you've ever seen them. The plan, if it can be called that, is simple in the way a lightning storm is simple. March on London. Demand the king abolish the poll tax. Make them hear you. And if they won't, well, everyone glances at their scythes and axes, which are technically farming tools, but look awfully good for more pointed conversations. By mid-morning, the horde sets off down the rutted dirt road, feet squelching through icy mud. The air is sharp with wood smoke and the slightly embarrassing scent of communal nerves. There's an almost festive atmosphere as the mob swells. Villagers from every hamlet join along the way, each carrying banners, some painted with rough crosses, others daubed with "No More Taxes" in letters so crooked they'd embarrass a drunk monk. The march is a study in chaos. Every time someone stops to relieve themselves, half the group follows, convinced they're taking a secret shortcut. Children trip over frozen clumps of manure. Dogs bark themselves hoarse. Carts loaded with half-rotten turnips rattle along, drawn by donkeys who look almost insulted to be part of this historic event. You find yourself beside a boy no older than 8, cheerfully dragging a rusted kitchen knife through the mud. He beams up at you with missing teeth and asks, "Will we see the king?" The question hangs in the air because none of you know the answer, but you grin anyway, ruffling his lice-ridden hair. "Aye, lad, we'll see him." At night, you camp in open fields or huddle beneath trees. Campfires dot the darkness, like fireflies, each one crackling with whispered tales of lords who'll quake at the peasants' approach. Bread is broken, stories shared. The atmosphere swings between fearful silence and manic laughter, the kind that says, "We've lost everything already, so what's left to fear?" Wat Tyler moves among the people like a man possessed, offering rough words of encouragement. They think we're animals, but tomorrow we show them we are men. His presence feels like a shield. You cling to it, ignoring the gnawing thought that no one here has ever seen the inside of London's walls, let alone stormed them. Day after day, the horde grows. Hundreds become thousands. Smoke from their fires rises in thick columns, visible for miles. Villagers who see you coming either join in or hide behind barred doors, praying they won't be caught between angry peasants and royal soldiers. By the time you near London, your ragged army stretches across hillsides, an undulating mass of peasants armed with sickles, hoes, and hearts sick of servitude. But as you top the final ridge, London appears on the horizon, sprawling and grey beneath a sky heavy with storm clouds. you feel a surge of awe and terror. There it is, the largest city in England, where your fate, and perhaps history itself, will be decided. Around you, your fellow peasants gasp, swear, or fall into stunned silence. The city looms like a stone giant, its towers glinting in the cold sun, the smoke of hundreds of hearths curling lazily into the sky. Somewhere beyond those walls waits the king, a boy barely into his teens, with the power to crush every dream you've dared to entertain. A shout goes up as Wat Tyler raises his sword high. The crowd surges forward, chanting, stumbling, but unstoppable. London awaits. The first thing that hits you as you shuffle into the outskirts of London is the smell, a pungent cocktail of rotting fish, animal dung, and the sour perfume of thousands of unwashed Londoners compressed into narrow alleys. Compared to your village, where the stench of goats was a treat, this is an olfactory assault. You gag reflexively, along with everyone else in your ragtag army, but you press on, because you didn't walk for days just to turn back at a bad smell. Ahead, the city walls loom high and menacing, their stone faces streaked with grime. The gates, thick as a forest of oaks, stand shut against you, but your numbers have swelled into a sea of peasants stretching beyond sight. Pitchforks, axes, clubs held aloft, an angry ripple of humanity. A chorus of chants rises. No more taxes, no more lords. The words roll forward, in a wave that rattles the teeth of the guards peeking from the parapets. Wat Tyler, astride a borrowed horse that looks as nervous as everyone else, rides to the front. He raises his sword and bellows, "We are here for justice." The cry echoes against stone and sky. Moments later, a terrified city official appears atop the walls, his robe fluttering as he peers down like a cat too scared to climb down from a tree. Negotiations go as well as one might expect when an angry mob faces an elite who can't comprehend a world without servants. The official's voice quavers as he insists the king will grant an audience. Behind you, peasants mutter curses, their hunger and rage simmering. A boy near your feet whispers to his father, "Is the king afraid?" The father doesn't answer, but his eyes burn with a fierce light. Soon enough, the gates creak open. Not fully, just enough for the city to realize what's about to happen. Like a dam breaking, the peasant horde surges forward. You're swept into London's streets, carried along by the tide of bodies and noise. The city's avenues, normally filled with the clatter of merchants' carts and the hollow clinks of knights' spurs, now ring with the thunder of thousands of peasants' feet. Everywhere you look, stone buildings loom like monuments to inequality. Wealth drips from mansions with glass windows, actual glass, while children with ribs like picket fences dart into alleys. You march past market stalls hastily abandoned, apples rolling underfoot, bolts of cloth trampled into the mud. Chickens' flat panic circles through the crowd. The city is alive with chaos. Your fellow peasants, hungry for more than food, turn their attention to the symbols of their oppression. Tax records are pulled from guild halls and set aflame. A cheer goes up as a pile of parchment smoulders, the flames devouring evidence of debts older than most of the rebels themselves. Every hiss of burning ink is a small, smoky victory. The houses of officials are ransacked, doors kicked in, cabinets overturned, featherbeds shredded like the world's angriest pillow fight. In the Tower of London, prisoners accused of petty crimes are freed and emerge blinking like moles into the light, bewildered but grateful. Word spreads that even the Archbishop of Canterbury isn't safe. Rumours swirl that he's barricaded himself in terror. London's ordinary folk, the bakers and butchers, peep from shuttered windows. Some slip into the streets, cautiously offering stale bread or buckets of water to the rebels, either in solidarity or in the desperate hope the mob won't torch their homes. The city's wealthiest, meanwhile, vanish behind iron gates or scuttle away like rats in fine fur cloaks. You stick close to your neighbours, eyes wide as you pass St. Paul's Cathedral, its towers soaring higher than anything you'd imagined. You try to grasp that you, a peasant who's never been farther than the nearest market, now stand at the heart of England, your feet planted in the cobbles of power itself. Yet beneath the electric thrill of revolution, a tension vibrates in the air. You sense that the city could turn on you at any moment. Word is the king has fled to the safety of the Tower, and rumours ripple that royal forces might ride out at dawn. But for now, just for now, London belongs to the peasants. The idea tastes sweeter than any bread you've ever eaten. As dusk falls, you stand with thousands in the shadow of the city's grandest halls. Fires crackle from hastily built camps. The night buzzes with hushed conversations about what tomorrow will bring. Above you, the stars shimmer cold and bright, uncaring of the revolution brewing below. You wrap yourself in your thin cloak, eyes on the distant tower where the king's standard flutters. Tomorrow, Wat Tyler says, the king will come to meet you face to face. You dare to hope. Morning comes sharp and pale, the air tense enough to snap. Fires burn low across the makeshift camps of peasants sprawled throughout London's streets. You rise, spine aching from the cobblestones, and find the square already packed. The rumour has become fact. King Richard II, only 14, and dressed like a golden doll, will meet Wat Tyler and hear the demands of the people. You shuffle towards Smithfield, where the king's entourage gleams in polished armour that catches the morning light like a cruel joke. Tyler rides ahead of your ragged horde, his sword at his side, a battered leather jerkin, his only protection against royal steel. His horse picks its way through mud and refuse, eyes rolling nervously at the crowd, pressing in from every angle. The king sits straight-backed on a white horse, expression carefully blank in a way only nobles can master. Around him, lords and knights look down their noses at you, their hands resting on sword hilts as if itching for the excuse to swing. A hush falls so heavy you can hear the creak of your neighbour's joints and the soft whimpers of children clutching their mother's skirts. Wat Tyler reins in before the boy king. He bows, but not deeply enough to please the watching lords. His voice carries across the square. We demand the end of serfdom, no more poll taxes, freedom to work our own land, and pardon for all here. The words, so long kept behind gritted teeth, now ring out clear and fierce. For a moment, you think the king might nod, might agree. His youthful face seems sympathetic, almost frightened. But then something shifts. Tyler's horse steps forward, the king's men bristle. A royal squire, red-faced and puffed up like a rooster, starts shouting about insolence and treason. The words crack like whips across the tense air. Tyler, undaunted, spits at the ground. You lie, he snaps, his hand dropping to his sword. A collective gasp rises from the crowd. The king's men surge. The Lord Mayor of London, pale and sweaty, lunges from the sidelines. His dagger flashes in the sun, a blur of steel. You watch in horror as he slashes Tyler across the face. The blow rings louder than the church bells that start tolling in sudden panic. Tyler reels, eyes wide with shock. Another slash, another grunt, and your leader collapses in the filth of Smithfield, blood blooming dark against the mud. A cry of fury erupts from the peasants. The air tears open with screams. But before the mob can charge, the king rides forward, his voice startlingly steady for someone who should still be worrying about pimples. He raises a hand, calling, "My good people, stay your rage. I am your king, and I will be your leader." You freeze along with thousands of others. His words weave a spell, and against every instinct you hesitate. The king's youthful face glows with confidence as he promises reforms, safety, an end to vengeance. His words fall like soft snow, muffling the raw terror, gripping your heart. You want to believe him. Everyone wants to believe him. But at your feet, Wat Tyler's lifeless eyes stare up at the grey sky, reflecting no hope, only the betrayal that ended his march. Around you, peasants sob, clutching each other. The revolution, so alive just hours ago, bleeds out with him into the cobblestones. Royal guards start to close ranks, their spears and swords glinting with authority. The king's voice grows colder as he repeats, "Go home, good people, return peacefully, and none shall suffer." Yet already you sense the shift. Knights prowl the edges of the crowd like wolves scenting blood. You feel the weight of every stone building around you, every alley where soldiers could spring. The promise of mercy curdles in your gut. Still, you obey. Because what choice do you have? The mob splinters, men and women stumbling away in shock and grief, minds numb with disbelief. You glance back one last time. Tyler's body lies twisted, a stark symbol of how quickly hope can die when it dares to speak. You walk away, shoulders slumped, the dream of freedom fading with each step. You trudge through London's narrow lanes, head down, feet dragging through muck. Around you, the once boisterous peasants shuffle like ghosts. The fires that burned bright the night before are cold ashes. The city feels different now, larger, darker, as though the stones themselves are laughing at your foolish dreams. Word spreads faster than rats. Wat Tyler is dead. The king's promises dissolve into the fog before they ever touch your ears. Within hours, royal guards move through the streets like iron tides, arresting anyone who can't prove they're a humble, obedient soul. Those once emboldened to chant freedom now cower behind barrels and doors. You hear of rebels dragged from hiding places, hung from gallows erected overnight, or beheaded in alleys to set examples. London's squares echo with the sickening thud of bodies hitting the earth. Those not killed flee, pouring from city gates in desperate rivers of rags and fear. You follow them, slipping through the chaos with your neighbours, your family clinging to your cloak. Beyond the walls, the countryside is no safer. Lords send armed men to punish the villages that dared rise up. Manor houses regain their grim quiet, broken only by the screams of peasants tortured for names of other traitors. The same roads that carried your hopeful march now bear columns of fugitives, gaunt and hollow-eyed, drifting back to homes that feel more like prisons than ever. When you reach your village days later, you find it changed. Doors hang open, huts burned, animals stolen by soldiers or scavengers. A few villagers left behind stand silent and brittle as frost-bitten stalks, eyes haunted by rumours of royal vengeance. The fields, unploughed and choked with weeds, promise a thin harvest. You realise the lords won't just collect their taxes. They'll demand more to pay for the cost of crushing your rebellion. The church bells toll again, but now they ring with a hollow note, a requiem for your fallen dreams. The priest preaches sermons on loyalty and the dangers of disobedience, his voice oily with self-preservation. Each Sunday, you kneel and mouth prayers, your heart numb, your eyes avoiding the cross that seems to hang heavier than before. Still, something has changed inside you. Though the revolt ended in blood and humiliation, the taste of defiance lingers on your tongue like bitter wine. At night, huddled in your cold hovel, you replay stories of those days in London. You remember the roar of the crowd, the feeling of standing shoulder to shoulder with neighbours who dared to want something more than endless servitude. And you see your children listening, eyes wide as you whisper what happened, how thousands of peasants demanded their rights, how for a few fierce days the powerful trembled. You tell them not because it will keep them safe, but because it might, one day, help them remember they don't have to bow forever. As the seasons roll on, the king's promises remain unkept. Poll taxes are reworked, but the hunger, the injustice, the sense of being livestock in another man's ledger never fades. You keep ploughing, keep paying, but each furrow carved into the earth is a silent act of stubbornness, a reminder that once you dared to rise. The years dull the pain, but not the memory. Wat Tyler's name becomes a whispered legend, half cautionary tale, half torch passed to the next generation. You watch your children grow, their hands calloused like yours, their eyes sharper. Sometimes, you catch them staring at the manor house on the hill with quiet, dangerous thoughtfulness. Because while the revolt failed, the seed of rebellion is stubborn, and you suspect that one day, maybe not today, maybe not even in your lifetime, the earth itself will remember those who marched, and the lords who thought they owned it will tremble once again. Until then, you live, you work, and you wait. Sudanly. You've just woken up in the year 1086, only 20 years after William the Conqueror won his shiny new kingdom. The good news? You're alive. The bad news? Today, the king's scribes are coming, and they want to know exactly how many chickens you own, how many teeth you have left, and how much dignity you're willing to part with. You sit up on your straw mat as dawn light filters through a crack in your hut's wooden planks. Outside, the village already thrums with panic. You hear old Elfrida shouting about how the king's men are coming to measure everything, including, she swears, the circumference of your buttocks for the royal records. You doubt it, but knowing William's obsession with control, you can't be entirely sure. The air is thick with the smell of wood smoke, animal droppings, and the sharp, acrid scent of fear. Chickens squawk as villagers frantically shuffle them from one hovel to another in a last-ditch effort to hide assets. Your neighbour Osric is trying to disguise his best pig with a smudge of mud and a hastily sewn pair of goat ears. It's not working, but the effort is inspiring. You step outside, boots sinking into a sea of half-frozen mud. A rooster crows, late as always, and is immediately shushed by the entire village. You join a nervous huddle near the well, where the reeve, the local steward who looks like he hasn't smiled since the Norman invasion, reads aloud from a parchment. Hear ye, the king's audit cometh. Any who withhold information shall face the wrath of royal justice. The words royal justice send a visible shiver through the crowd. Everyone knows it's less about fairness and more about how creatively they can make you regret your existence. You return to your hut and survey your worldly possessions. One lopsided wooden bowl, a tunic with more holes than fabric, 3 chickens, 2 healthy, 1 suspiciously lethargic, and half a loaf of bread, so stale you could use it to bludgeon an ox. It's not much, but it's everything, and you know William's men will count every feather and crumb. Your wife eyes you warily as you pace. Do you think they'll tax the turnips? She whispers. You shrug helplessly. These are men who taxed entire forests because squirrels lived there. Nothing is safe. Outside, the reeve's voice drones on. The king's men shall arrive by noon. You shall present yourselves, your lands, your beasts, and your debts. The words tumble over your ears like a funeral dirge. As the morning wanes, peasants gather in nervous knots, muttering about what to say and what to hide. Someone proposes burying coins behind the latrine. Another suggests telling the scribes their cows died of pestilential vapours. Neither plan seems promising. The wind carries a low chant. Hoofbeats. The scribes are near. The village falls silent. Chickens freeze mid-strut. Even the goats seem to realize the gravity of the moment, bleating softly as though praying. You take a deep breath, squaring your shoulders. This day will decide whether your winter is spent shivering in poverty or shivering in slightly worse poverty. Because in 1086, the Domesday Book isn't just a ledger, it's the king's ultimate power flex, a census designed to squeeze every coin, every egg, every scrap of value from his newly conquered realm. And now it's your turn to stand before the cold-eyed scribes who will record your life, in ink, for the king's eternal pleasure. They come at noon, right on time because nothing says terrifying authority like Norman punctuality. You hear the jingling of bridles first, a crisp sound that slices through the hushed village like a blade. Then they appear, a procession of men in dark cloaks, riding shaggy horses that look every bit as sour as their riders. At their head sits the lead scribe, a man with parchment, white skin, a nose that points accusingly at everything, and eyes as cold as pond ice in February. The villagers part like frightened geese as the scribes dismount. The lead scribe surveys the cluster of peasants, as if measuring their worth by the weight of their dirt. He pulls out a quill, freshly plucked from a goose whose ghost you suspect now haunts him, and unrolls a length of parchment so long it would make a cathedral jealous. "Bring forth your households," he intones, voice echoing unnaturally across the thatched rooftops. A wave of nervous movement ripples through the crowd. You see mothers pushing children forward, as if a large brood might earn pity. Old men hiding behind oxen. Dogs slinking away with the uncanny instinct that trouble has arrived. The scribes divide the village into lines. One for livestock owners, one for craftsmen, one for everyone else. You find yourself wedged between Osric, still pathetically trying to pass off his pig as a goat, and a weaver who smells like he's been soaking in stale beer for 3 days. The line crawls forward under the scribe's unflinching gaze. Each villager steps up to a wooden table hastily erected in the village square. The table's legs sink slightly into the muddy ground, giving it a listing, ominous sway. There, a scribe interrogates them with the warmth of a frozen fish. How many hides of land? How many oxen? How many pigs? Each answer is scribbled with deliberate flourish, quill scratching the parchment like an executioner sharpening his blade. You approach the table, pulse hammering in your ears. The scribe's eyes flick up, briefly scanning you like he's assessing whether your bones are worth boiling for soup. He gestures impatiently. You stammer out your possessions. 3 chickens, no mention of the one suspiciously limp. 1 leaky hut, half an acre of rocky soil that grows more disappointment than grain. His quill moves, each stroke a nail in the coffin of your hope for a lower tax. From the corner of your eye, you catch another scribe opening a chest filled with tally sticks, slender rods notched to record taxes, debts, and favours owed. They pass these sticks between each other like a secret language. When they read them aloud, the air rings with absurd proclamations. 1 pig missing from Lord Balthair's manor, 3 bushels of barley unaccounted for, 2 cows dead under suspicious circumstances. The words make peasants shuffle uneasily. You realize the scribes are recording every discrepancy, every missing animal, every creative interpretation of what counts as taxable. Behind the scribes, 2 armored men stand like iron statues, hands on sword hilts. They scan the crowd with bored malice, as if they'd love an excuse to use those swords for something other than looking important. Their presence makes the air feel thicker, harder to breathe. A child starts crying. A mother shushes him with frantic eyes. The scribes work methodically, leaving no pot unturned. They enter huts without knocking, scribbling notes about flea-ridden bedding and suspiciously fresh goat droppings. When they reach old Elfrida's home, they poke through her meagre stores with quills like daggers. 2 clay bowls, 1 broken. They intone solemnly, as if this discovery might tip the scales of the kingdom. The dark humour of the scene is impossible to miss. Peasants trying to hide chickens beneath tunics. 1 man insisting his cow is actually a very large dog. Another attempting to bribe a scribe with a mouldy wedge of cheese that might legally qualify as a biological weapon. Each attempt fails spectacularly. The scribes, faces fixed in permanent scowls, simply record every awkward lie for future punishment. Your neighbour Githa attempts to distract a scribe by praising his quill work. So elegant, so regal, but he barely blinks. His quill keeps scratching, each mark another stone chained to your village's collective neck. As the afternoon drags on, the atmosphere thickens into a stew of fear, frustration, and the sour stench of unwashed peasants packed too close together. The scribes shout orders, "Fetch the reeve, summon the manor steward," and each time, someone scurries off, returning with pale-faced men carrying scrolls, records, or, in one case, a broken abacus that's clearly seen better centuries. At sunset, the scribes pause to eat. They unpack roasted meats and fresh loaves of white bread, foods peasants like you might see once a year if you're lucky. You watch them chew methodically, their jaws working as if grinding your village's hopes along with their dinner. No one dares beg for scraps. Even the dogs sit at a respectful distance, eyes wide with envy. As the scribes finish their meal, they wipe greasy fingers on crisp linen napkins, and gather their parchment once more. "Tomorrow," one declares, voice cutting through the evening fog, "we continue with the manor's tallies." His words leave your stomach twisted tighter than a knotted rope. You shuffle home under the moon's thin light, mind buzzing with what was recorded today. Every egg, every grain, every scrap of your life now lies in the scribe's ledgers. Tomorrow, they'll dig deeper, and you can only pray your debts don't bury you alive. But for now, you curl on your straw mat, heart pounding as you wonder if there's a way to keep a secret in a world where even your nightmares seem taxable. Dawn slips through your hut's rag-stuffed window like a guilty cat. The village square is already alive with the cold clang of armour and the scratch of quills. You rub sleep from your eyes with hands that smell like old onions, bracing yourself for another day of relentless scrutiny. Today, the scribes turn their cold gaze toward the manor itself, a place peasants usually avoid unless forced, like sheep herded toward the shears. The manor house rises at the edge of your village like a stone toad, squat and self-important. You trudge behind the crowd as the scribes lead the procession inside. The air inside the manor is a sour cocktail of damp stone, stale meat, and the faint whiff of something suspiciously like rotting hay. The reeve scurries ahead, eyes darting, sweat pooling in his collar despite the chill. The scribes demand the steward unlock the manor archives, a small, dark room with shelves stacked high with scrolls, tally sticks, and ledgers older than most of your ancestors. The steward's hand shakes as he produces the key. It turns with a groan, the door swinging open to a room thick with the musty scent of neglected paper and dead spiders. The lead scribe steps in first, nostrils flaring like a bloodhound's. He begins rifling through the records, pulling out tally sticks by the dozen. These are rough wooden rods, notched with cryptic marks representing debts, taxes, and fines. Medieval IOUs you can't eat or burn without risking a royal hanging. Each tally stick is snapped from a matching pair, one half given to the tax collector, the other kept here in the manor. When brought together, their notches must align. If they don't, someone's been cooking the medieval books. The first mismatched stick emerges from the pile like a rotten fish floating to the surface. The scribe frowns, comparing it against the manor's records. His eyes narrow as he holds it up, turning it in the weak sunlight streaming through the arrow-slit window. The steward coughs nervously, mumbling something about clerical errors and woodworms. The scribes' faces remain blank as gravestones. Another tally stick reveals debts paid by a peasant long dead, except the steward's records show the same debt collected again last year. A hush falls over the room. You hear your neighbour Osric exhale through his nose, with the satisfaction of a man who always suspected the steward was up to something, but lacked the words or teeth to say so. Each discovery piles onto the last. Debts erased, amounts doubled, pigs that died mysteriously only to be taxed twice in different names. The scribes' quills dance furiously, ink splattering as they record every petty embezzlement and creative accounting trick. The steward tries to bluster. "Surely, sirs, you understand how hard it is to keep track of so many peasants." But his voice trembles like a rabbit under a hawk's shadow. The reeve, who thought himself safe, suddenly finds the scribes turning their gaze on him. His ledgers are fetched, crumbling tomes bound in cracked leather and stained with who knows what. The scribes' quills hiss across the pages like snakes, exposing every lie. 2 pigs listed, but 3 collected. Land leased to a cousin who doesn't exist. Entire families taxed for barns they never owned. The peasants huddled outside whisper furiously. Some smirk, delighted to see their tormentors squirm. Others glance nervously, worried the scribe's fury might spill beyond the manor's walls. The atmosphere vibrates with schadenfreude and dread in equal measure. One scribe pulls a bundle of secret tally sticks from a hidden compartment behind a rotting tapestry, sticks the steward clearly didn't expect anyone to find. They're bound with a fraying leather strap, each notch a record of uncollected taxes or favours owed to the steward by other lords. It's a medieval Pandora's box, the proof that for years the manor has skimmed off your village's sweat like a leech fattening in secret. Outside, a crowd of peasants gathers near the manor door, the word spreading like fire in dry straw. They found the tally sticks. Faces appear at every shutter, eyes gleaming with a mix of vindication and terror. For a moment it feels like the world has flipped on its head. Those who ruled by the ledger now stand exposed, their crimes carved in wood. The scribe's leader steps into the doorway, tally sticks held high like grim trophies. His voice carries across the courtyard. "The king shall know of these deceptions." The words hit the peasants like a thunderclap. A cheer almost rises, quickly stifled. No one wants to seem too pleased lest the scribes decide to count your chickens next. By late afternoon, the manor's once secret records lie in chaotic piles. The steward, face pale and sweaty, wrings his hands, caught in the trap he helped build. The reeve stands stiff and silent, eyes flicking desperately for an escape route. You stand there, cold seeping into your feet, realizing you're witnessing something rare, a crack in the stone face of feudal power. The scribes may only care because the king's coffers were cheated, but for a fleeting moment, justice smells almost sweet, even if it's served with a side of terror. As dusk settles, the scribes order guards to seal the manor archives. Tomorrow, they announce, the reeve and steward shall account for these discrepancies. The words hang heavy, like the first drop of rain before a storm. You trudge home through deepening shadows, mind-reeling. For once, it isn't the peasants who face the king's wrath, and as you slip beneath your threadbare blanket, you dare to wonder if the truth recorded in those tally sticks might change your village's fate, or at least remind the lords that even numbers carved in wood can come back to haunt them. You wake before dawn, Not because you slept well. Nobody sleeps well with the scribes in town, but because of the frantic sounds coming from the manor. The reeve and steward are already awake, voices rising like panicked roosters. You creep outside, joining a knot of sleepy-eyed peasants at the manor's edge. The morning air is heavy with fog, and the stale scent of yesterday's fear. Inside, the manor's main hall is a war zone of ledgers, parchment scraps, and tally sticks, stacked like firewood. The steward, eyes wild, waves a ledger overhead, as though it might sprout wings and fly him out of trouble. "It's not what it looks like," he insists to the scribes. His voice cracks, betraying him. One scribe calmly jots this down. Voice, suspiciously squeaky. The reeve tries a different tactic. He's down on one knee before the lead scribe, hands clasped in supplication, breath smelling like a fermented turnip. "Mistakes were made," he whimpers. "But surely small errors, tiny errors, are to be expected?" The scribe raises an eyebrow so sharply it could cut cheese. His quill scratches across parchment with icy precision. The scribes begin comparing the steward's ledger, the reeve's tallies, and the king's own records from previous years. It's like watching a pack of hounds sniffing out a wounded hare. They note every discrepancy with the delighted malice of accountants who've just discovered their quarry's secret stash of coins. You and the other villagers press closer, drawn by the irresistible spectacle of your tormentors squirming. You hear the scribe's voice, slow and crisp, reading aloud. According to last year's record, Lord Brackenfield's manor produced 40 bushels of barley, yet the steward's account shows only 20 collected. He pauses. Where did the other 20 bushels go? The steward's face goes through every shade of medieval panic. Red, white, greenish. He stammers something about mould, rats, possibly divine intervention. A peasant behind you snorts so hard they nearly choke. Another scribe interrupts the steward's babbling, adding, "And the number of pigs fluctuates suspiciously. 10 in spring, 5 by summer, back to 9 in autumn." His tone drips sarcasm, as though the pigs had orchestrated a seasonal disappearing act. The reeve throws the steward under the ox cart, claiming he never saw these irregularities because he trusted the steward's word. The steward fires back, blaming the reeve for faulty counts, calling him a turnip-brained fool. Their argument escalates into the medieval equivalent of a soap opera, finger-pointing, shrill accusations, and the occasional swear creative enough to make a pig blush. The scribes, unperturbed, keep working. Their ink-stained hands dance over parchment, tally sticks clacking ominously as they verify every line. They bring out the secret sticks discovered the day before, matching notches against debts recorded. Each time the sticks don't align, the steward's face sinks further into despair. Each time they do align, it only reveals how much money has gone missing. Soon the scribe's questions grow sharper, voices louder. Who signed for the sale of 3 cows in 1084? Why did a vanished peasant's debt appear on another's tally? Where are the hides of land recorded as leased but not taxed? The reeve tries to explain it all away with stories of floods, fires, famines, and plagues, except none of those happened that year. His excuses sound like a child's bedtime story gone horribly wrong. Through it all, the steward attempts a last-ditch bribe, offering a scribe a pouch of coins so light it might only buy a single stale loaf. The scribe eyes the purse, then the steward, and scribbles, "Attempted corruption," with such vigour the quill nearly pierces the parchment. Outside, word spreads like wildfire. Peasants whisper gleefully, marvelling at the sight of their oppressors twisting in the wind. Even the cows seem smug, chewing cud with extra satisfaction. Old Elfrida mutters. If this keeps up, they'll find the steward's been skimming cream off every cow for years. By midday, the scribes order the steward and reeve to sit side by side in the manor hall. A scribe reads out their combined offences with a voice as clear as a church bell. The list is long: double-taxing widows, inventing tenants who don't exist, pocketing coin meant for the king's coffers. Each line draws gasps from the crowd and fresh beads of sweat from the accused. The lead scribe announces that both men will be held in the manor's cold cellar until royal messengers arrive with orders from King William himself. The steward protests weakly. Surely there's a mistake. But 2 guards hoist him bodily down the cellar steps, his shrieks echoing like a rat dropped in a well. The peasants watch, breathless. For once, they see fear on the faces of those who made their lives miserable, and it tastes sweeter than any feast. You catch your neighbour's eye. You both grin despite yourselves, a fleeting moment of solidarity, forged in shared suffering and schadenfreude. The scribes aren't done, though. They collect every remaining tally stick, every ledger, every scrap of parchment from the manor archives. These are packed into wooden chests, sealed with heavy wax, and marked with the king's crest, an unspoken promise that this information will soon feed the royal appetite for revenue and perhaps vengeance. As evening descends, you return home under a sky bruised purple by the setting sun. The village buzzes with gossip. Will the king find the lord? Will the steward's head decorate the manor gate? Or will the peasants pay double for daring to watch their masters squirm? Either way, the numbers, fudged, falsified, or forgotten, have finally caught up with those who thought themselves untouchable. And tonight, you fall asleep, knowing the weight of every grain, every coin, every secret tally stick will soon fall where it belongs. The village wakes to a morning thick with rumours. The scribes' horses stand saddled in the square, breath steaming in the frosty dawn. A hush falls as the lead scribe emerges from the manor, his cloak fluttering like a crow's wings. In his arms he carries the sealed chests of tally sticks and ledgers, their wax seals gleaming blood-red in the sunrise. Around him, scribes hold rolled parchments that seem impossibly long, each a testament to every oat, piglet and peasant soul tallied in William's grand census. You gather with your neighbours, eyes wide, feet rooted in the churned mud. The steward and reeve, faces grey and hollow, are marched from the manor cellar by 2 guards. Their hands are bound with rough rope, cheeks streaked with tear tracks they'll deny until the day they die. The lead scribe raises his voice, crisp and merciless. The king's will is done here. The Domesday Book's records shall show this village's wealth, and these men's deceit. It feels like the world holds its breath. You can hear a distant crow cawing, the nervous shifting of sheep, the faint squeak of a terrified mouse in someone's pocket. A scribe unrolls a fresh length of parchment, reads out the village's final tallies. 13 hides of land, 9 plough teams, 25 cows, 7 pigs, of which 2 are unaccounted for. Each word lands like a hammer blow, your village's entire existence flattened into ink. When the numbers end, the lead scribe nods. This record is final, he intones, as if carving the words into stone. You realize this moment isn't just about taxes. It's the king's power, made permanent on parchment. 1,000 years from now, strangers will know exactly how many chickens your ancestors owned, and exactly how thoroughly they were taxed. As the scribes mount their horses, peasants press close, hungry for any hint of mercy. "What of our taxes?" one brave soul shouts. The lead scribe doesn't look down. The king shall decide. His words fall like winter hail, cold, hard, and offering no comfort. They ride out, hooves churning mud, chests of records clanking with every step. A strange quiet settles on the village. You glance around and see it mirrored in every face. The exhausted knowledge that your life now exists not just in the dirt you plough, but in ledgers locked far away in a Norman castle. With the scribes gone, the villagers drift home like ghosts. Some trudge to the fields, resigned to ploughing the same furrows that had been counted, taxed, and claimed. Others huddle in small groups, whispering of what might happen when the king reads of the reeve's fraud and the steward's missing pigs. Some dare to hope the Lord himself will be punished. Others fear he'll double the taxes to make up his losses. In the manor, the steward and reeve sit chained, their futures dangling on the king's whim. Rumours swirl that royal messengers are already galloping south, bearing news of their crimes. You hear one man say he saw the steward's lips moving in constant prayer. Another scoffs. Too late for that. God may forgive, but the king keeps receipts. Days later, a royal edict arrives. It's read aloud by the reeve's replacement, an outsider with a permanent frown and a sword polished to a mirror shine. The edict orders the steward stripped of his title, his lands seized for the crown. The reeve's fate is worse. A swift execution in the village square, his body left hanging just long enough to remind everyone how sharp the king's memory can be. You watch, clutching your child's hand as the rope tightens, heart a maelstrom of horror and grim satisfaction. The villagers stand silent, the air thick with the sour tang of fear and the faintest spark of justice. When the body is cut down, the new reeve announces taxes will be collected directly by royal officials. No more middlemen to steal what little you have. You know it won't make life easy, but it feels like the first time in your life the Lord's boot has eased from your neck, even if only by a hair's breadth. Weeks pass, and life settles back into its relentless rhythm. Ploughing, planting, praying the weather doesn't turn on you. But now, whenever you glance at the manor, you remember the day scribes found the secret tally sticks. You remember the steward's pale face, the reeve's desperate lies. And you remember the final tally, the record that etched your village's toil into the king's grand book. The Domesday Book becomes a legend almost overnight. Peasants speak of it with a mix of dread and awe. Some say it's the king's magic, others that it's a curse. But you know the truth. It's the most powerful thing in the realm, because it makes you visible, counted, impossible to ignore. At night, lying on your straw mat with stars winking through the holes in your roof, you wonder who will read your village's numbers long after you're gone. Will they see only taxes and debts, or imagine the lives lived behind each tally mark? The songs sung, the bread baked, the stubborn laughter that survived even a royal audit? And you fall asleep to that thought, warmed by the small, quiet certainty that history may have counted you, but it hasn't yet crushed you. Segment 4. Dinner with the sheriff. Venison pies, bribes counted in candlelight, jesters mocking commoners. Congratulations. You've just woken up in the year 1278, in a town so thoroughly under the sheriff's thumb that even the rats bow politely as they scurry through the alleys. The good news? Tonight's the grand feast at the sheriff's hall, an event rumoured to feature enough food to feed the whole town, if of course you're important enough to sit at the table. The bad news? You're not important, but you've been ordered to attend anyway, which in medieval terms is like being invited to your own flogging with a complimentary mug of ale. Your eyes crack open to the soft grey light of dawn filtering through your hovel's warped shutters. The first sound you hear is your neighbour hacking up something best left unidentified. The second is the town crier's bell clanging down the street, voice hoarse from announcing the sheriff's summons. All subjects of his lordship are to present themselves at sundown. You sigh, rolling onto your back as the straw mattress pokes your spine with each uncomfortable reality of peasant life. You rise slowly, every joint popping like a cheap lute. Your tunic, stiff with the aroma of unwashed wool and last week's onions, clings to you like a needy ghost. Outside, townsfolk gather in worried clusters. Whispers swirl with the morning fog. The sheriff's feast is where debts are settled, alliances forged, and if you're not careful, accusations of poaching fabricated faster than you can say, "I didn't touch that deer." A merchant's wife, eyes darting like a trapped rabbit, frets over what to wear. She only owns one dress, and it has a suspicious stain no amount of scrubbing has removed. A cooper grumbles about leaving his barrels unattended, certain the sheriff's men will help themselves in his absence. Even the town priest looks pale, clutching his rosary like he knows tonight's blessings will need extra potency. As the day crawls by, the town transforms. Servants rush between market stalls, carrying sacks of flour, bolts of cloth, crates of apples. A procession of cooks arrives, their knives glinting, faces pinched with the knowledge that one burnt pie could mean a night in the stocks. At the sheriff's hall, guards stand watch with crossed arms and narrowed eyes, as if daring someone to cancel the festivities. You spend the afternoon trying to make yourself presentable. By medieval standards, this means scraping half the grime from your face with a rag and picking the most intact of your two shirts. You catch your reflection in a puddle. A peasant, eyes sunken, clothes patched beyond recognition, and a hopeful glint you try to extinguish before it gets you killed. The sun dips low, painting the sky with bruised oranges and purples as bells toll from the town church. The sheriff's hall glows with candlelight, its tall windows spilling golden beams across the square. The air fills with the scent of roasting venison, mingling with less pleasant notes of sweat, horse manure, and your own creeping dread. You join the shuffling crowd headed for the hall. A hush settles. As the heavy wooden doors creak open, revealing a world of polished platters, swaying banners, and the sheriff himself. Broad, shouldered, cloaked in furs, eyes sharp as a hawk's talons. He stands at the head of a long table, smiling the kind of smile that makes you want to check if your purse is still in your pocket. Tonight, you will eat among those who rule you, your hunger clashing with your fear. And somewhere between the flickering candlelight and the laughter of men who could ruin your life with a word, you'll learn that dinner at the sheriff's table isn't about food, it's about power. You step into the sheriff's hall, boots sinking into rushes strewn across the floor, meant to catch the drippings of both gravy and dignity. The hall is massive by your standards, its timber beams arching overhead like the ribs of some slumbering beast. Banners hang limp in the cold air, each one emblazoned with the sheriff's crest. A boar's head over crossed swords, which feels appropriate given the host's appetite for both meat and menace. Long trestle tables stretch the length of the hall, groaning under platters of venison pies, roasted fowl glistening with fat, and trenchers piled high with lumps of bread dense enough to stop a crossbow bolt. Candles sputter in iron chandeliers, their flickering light casting dancing shadows that make every face look a little more suspicious, a little more sinister. You find your place at the far end of the table, of course, seated between a tanner who smells like he sleeps in the skins he scrapes, and a miller whose one tooth points accusingly at anyone who dares meet his gaze. The bench beneath you wobbles precariously. Above the din of shifting bodies and nervous coughing, minstrels pluck lutes and whisper to each other, eyes flicking to the sheriff as though each note might earn them a beating if it hits the wrong chord. At the high table, raised on a dais so the sheriff can look down on his subjects with ease, the man himself sits, sprawled like a lion, fattened on stolen lambs. His eyes scan the hall with predatory calm, noting who fidgets, who bows too deeply, who fails to bow at all. Beside him, local merchants and minor lords laugh too loudly at each other's jokes, cheeks flushed with wine, and the desperate need to curry favour. Servants scurry between tables, arms piled with platters, so heavy they stagger. They place steaming pies in front of you, their crusts flaky and golden, the rich scent of venison wafting up like an insult to your empty belly. You hesitate, wondering if it's a trick, if reaching for the food might mark you as greedy. Then you notice others tearing into theirs, gravy dribbling down chins, so you risk it. The first bite fills your mouth with buttery bliss, so decadent it nearly makes you weep. The sheriff raises his goblet, filled to the brim with blood-red wine. The hall falls silent, the hush so absolute you can hear your own heart pounding. His voice booms, oiled with forced cheer. Friends, tonight we feast. Tonight we remember our bonds of loyalty, to the crown, to the shire, and of course, his eyes gleam as they sweep over the hall, landing on each trembling peasant, to me. A ragged cheer follows, punctuated by the hollow clang of goblets raised by people who know enthusiasm is safer than honesty. The sheriff's smile widens, revealing teeth yellowed like old parchment. He snaps his fingers, and a servant brings a pie crowned with antlers, an entire deer's head baked into a crust, eyes glazed with something disturbingly lifelike. The sheriff carves it with the same dagger he keeps strapped to his belt, slices falling onto his plate in thick, bloody slabs. As the feast progresses, the sounds of chewing, slurping, and forced laughter mix into a sticky symphony. The minstrels pick up their tempo, the melody dancing from somber chords to something jauntier, as if trying to convince the peasants this is a merry occasion. But the undercurrent of fear hums louder than any lute. A burly merchant named Reginald, face pockmarked, rings gleaming on every finger, starts boasting about his contributions to the sheriff's coffers. His voice carries far, no doubt intentionally. 50 silver marks this quarter alone, he crows, loud enough to make you flinch. The sheriff nods graciously, accepting the praise as if silver simply appeared at his doorstep like a devoted dog. A hush sweeps the table as a servant trips, nearly spilling a tureen of gravy onto a noble's boots. The hall freezes. Eyes snap to the sheriff, who watches the trembling servant with lazy interest. He lets the silence stretch, long enough that you start to wonder if you'll see the servant flogged then and there. Finally, he chuckles softly, the sound low and dangerous. "Careful, boy," he says, voice like velvet hiding a knife. The servant's legs practically liquefy as he scuttles away. As candles burn lower, dripping wax onto the long tables, the sheriff's men, thick, armed, beady, eyed brutes in ill-fitting chainmail, move among the guests like wolves checking their herd. They lean in to whisper, collecting quiet words, subtle nods, the glint of coins passed under folded napkins. You realize you're watching a dance older than the sheriff himself, the ceremonial bribing of the man who can ruin you. A small-time brewer tries to slip a coin into a guard's hand, only to drop it with a sharp clink. Conversation pauses, the sound ringing like a church bell announcing doom. Everyone looks up. The sheriff's gaze turns slowly, freezing the brewer with the lazy malice of a cat toying with a mouse. Then, with a tight smile, the sheriff nods for the guard to pick up the coin. No words needed. The brewer's face pales to the color of curdled milk. Your own hands shake as you break bread, crumbs spilling onto the rushes. You know you have nothing worth offering but your silence and your gratitude for not being noticed. Around you, you sense your fellow peasants reaching the same conclusion, shoulders hunching lower with every passing minute. The feast grows louder, a fevered pitch of forced merriment. Goblets clink like distant thunder. Someone starts a song about the sheriff's generosity, the lyrics so obsequious they make your skin crawl. Each verse praises the sheriff's wisdom, his fairness, his supposed love for the common folk, a love that looks suspiciously like hunger in the candlelight. The sheriff beams as the song continues, slouching deeper in his chair, head tilting back with theatrical pleasure. His rings glint in the flicker of the candles, his eyes half-lidded as he savors the fear masquerading as respect. He drinks deeply, wine staining his lips as red as the deer's blood still on his dagger. The feast reaches its height as servants carry out new platters piled with roasted birds and bowls of honeyed turnips. The sheriff claps his hands. "Bring the jester!" he commands. The room's hush returns, heavy as a wet blanket. You swallow hard, knowing that after the feast's greedy quiet, the true cruelty of the night is about to begin. The jester's bells tinkle faintly as he emerges from the shadows. A wiry figure clad in motley, cheeks rouged like a lecherous cherub, eyes darting over the crowd like a fox casing a henhouse. He bows low before the sheriff's dais, his cap's crooked horns brushing the rush-strewn floor. Behind him, the table's quiet, the only sounds the sputter of candles and the uneasy shuffling of guests bracing for the jester's tongue. But tonight, the jester is not the main show. As he begins his lewd, biting commentary, two of the sheriff's men slip through the tables, hands extended like monks collecting alms. Except instead of prayer, they collect coins. One by one, merchants, millers, and petty lords slide small purses into the guards' palms, trying to look casual while their eyes flick nervously toward the sheriff's raised dais. The candles burn low, dripping rivers of wax onto the tables as the guards ferry each offering up to the sheriff. He receives every pouch with bored indifference, weighing them in his hand as if feeling the heft of the guest's desperation. Occasionally he flicks a coin from a bag, examines it in the candlelight, then drops it into a chest at his feet with a dull clink that cuts through the jester's crude jokes like a guillotine. The chest itself is an ominous thing, oak-bound in black iron bands, its lock as thick as your wrist. You can almost hear it humming with the hopes of those who pay and the despair of those who can't. Each thud of coins falling inside sounds like a bell tolling for another soul sold to the sheriff's favor. The jester prances between tables, voice sharp as vinegar. Look at the merchants fattening the sheriff's purse, fatter even than their wives, who spend more time with the cook than with their husbands. His words slice through the hall, sending ripples of forced laughter up the long tables. The sheriff chuckles indulgently, gnawing a hunk of venison like a wolf savoring the marrow. Meanwhile, the bribery continues in a hushed procession. A well-fed tanner, face slick with sweat, hands over a pouch with trembling fingers. The sheriff doesn't glance up from his meal, but raises one thick eyebrow, a gesture that makes the tanner stammer promises of additional gifts should his tanning rights be renewed next spring. A burly miller tries to buy the sheriff's silence on the small matter of a few borrowed sacks of grain. His purse lands in the chest with a final, hopeless clank. At the far end of the hall, a skinny reeve tries slipping only a few coppers, hoping the sheriff won't notice. The sheriff's eyes flicker to him with reptilian precision. He gestures almost lazily, and two guards seize the reeve by the arms, hauling him into the center of the hall. The jester skips over, eyes gleaming, cat bells jingling like sinister sleigh bells. "A gift so small," he crows. "It's hardly worth the sheriff's time." The crowd titters nervously, their laughter brittle as thin ice. You swallow hard, hands clenched in your lap, heart hammering in your chest. You know you have nothing worth offering but a few coppers you've squirreled away for a bad winter, and you can't afford to surrender even that. So you shrink lower on the bench, hoping the guard's eyes will slide past you like water over stone. They do, this time, but your relief tastes like ashes. The sheriff's chest grows heavier with each transaction, and you can't help but wonder if the floorboards beneath his dais might collapse under the combined weight of greed and fear. Every now and then, the sheriff opens the chest to toss in another handful of coins, the soft chime of silver echoing like a hymn of corruption. His eyes gleam in the candlelight, small and hungry, like a cat playing with a mouse. The jester's performance grows more biting, his voice rising above the clink of coins. Here's a farmer so poor his cow has more meat on its bones than he does, and yet even he's expected to feed the sheriff's purse. A ripple of uncomfortable laughter flows through the nobles and merchants. The peasants keep their eyes fixed on their plates, chewing slowly, willing themselves invisible. You glance around, faces pale and tense, sweat gleaming on brows, lips twisted into rictus smiles that vanish the moment the sheriff's gaze moves on. Some people laugh too loudly, desperate to prove they're in on the joke, and not the butt of it. Others whisper prayers to saints unlikely to care about a bribe's outcome. The candles flicker, painting every face in dancing shadows, eyes hollow with dread. A hush falls as the sheriff himself stands, goblet raised high, wine catching the candlelight like fresh blood. "My loyal friends," he drawls, voice smooth as rancid butter. "Tonight you have proven your devotion, to law, to order, to me." His eyes sweep the hall with lazy malice. "Rest assured, I remember every gift given, and every gift withheld." He drains the goblet in one swallow, wine trailing from the corner of his mouth, then tosses it to a servant who fumbles to catch it. The sheriff signals the guards. The chest is slammed shut with a metallic finality that echoes through the hushed hall. The jester somersaults across the floor, landing near the sheriff with unsettling grace. He bows deeply, voice ringing clear. "Long live the sheriff. Long live his generosity and his memory." The sheriff smirks, eyes crinkling at the corners like old leather. "Indeed," he purrs. "Long live my memory." His words hang heavy as smoke, the unspoken threat winding around every neck like a tightening noose. You exhale shakily, the rich scent of venison turning sour in your nose. You understand now. This dinner is no celebration. It's a pageant of power, each course a reminder of who holds the whip. The sheriff's table is a ledger written in grease and wine, each coin a footnote to someone's rise or ruin. As the feast drags into night, you watch merchants slur drunken praises, peasants feign laughter, and guards loom like vultures waiting for something to die. The jester capers among them all, jokes and insults flowing like wine, foul, intoxicating, and certain to leave you with a headache. You keep your head down, mind buzzing with the knowledge that tonight's bribes will ripple through the town like a dropped stone in a stagnant pond. Favors promised, alliances forged, debts recorded in the sheriff's memory, and perhaps in the dark corners of your own. Because someday, someone will remember this night, and whether you paid your due could mean the difference between survival and the stocks. And as candlelight dances on the sheriff's smirking face, you realize this feast is less a meal than a ceremony. A binding, bloody covenant between ruler and ruled, sealed by venison, bribes, and fear. The sheriff leans back in his chair, boots planted firmly on the dais, hands resting on his rounded belly. His eyes flicker to the jester, who stands center hall, arms spread wide as if to embrace the uneasy crowd. A hush settles over the feast. The guards pause their rounds. Merchants clutch their goblets, and even the minstrels fall silent, their lutes held frozen in mid-strum. The jester's bells chime softly in the stillness, the only sound above the crackle of tallow candles sputtering in the smoky air. With a flourish, the jester begins. "Let me tell you the tale of the peasant who thought himself important." His voice rings high and clear, cutting through the hall with sharp, cold precision. He prances from table to table, each step exaggerated, his ragged shoes slapping the rushes. He dreamed of being noble, of dancing with ladies in silk, and then he woke up face, down in his pigpen, his dreams drowned in swill. He ends with a cartwheel that lands him inches from your bench, eyes gleaming with manic glee as he leers at your neighbours. The sheriff barks a laugh, deep and resonant, a wolf's chuckle in a barn full of sheep. Around the high table, minor lords and well-fed merchants join in, their laughter swelling as though on command. But at the far end, where you and other commoners sit, faces remain frozen, smiles half-formed, eyes darting nervously. Because you know what happens if you don't laugh, the sheriff notices. The jester leaps onto the nearest table, nearly sending trenchers and platters flying. He sways dramatically, balancing with the practiced ease of a man who's done this routine hundreds of times for crowds both bored and bloodthirsty. His voice slides into a sing-song as he picks his next target. And here we have a cooper's wife, so homely the rats complain when she enters the cellar. A ripple of forced chuckles spreads from the high table, but you hear a muffled sob as the woman's face crumples, her husband gripping her hand beneath the table. The jester spins, cat bells jingling. His eyes, sharp as broken glass, land on a skinny apprentice who tries to shrink under the table. Oh, and this one. So weak he can't lift a chicken without wheezing, but strong enough, I hear, to steal eggs from his master. A scandalized gasp rises. The apprentice's cheeks flame red. He opens his mouth to protest, but catches sight of the sheriff's bored, dangerous stare, and swallows his words like poison. Each jest grows sharper, more vicious. The jester mimics peasants' stooped gaits, their grovelling pleas for mercy, their terror of taxes. He does cruel imitations of village women in labour, squealing exaggerated cries that send nobles into fits of delighted laughter. You feel your stomach twist with every giggle from the dais. The jokes are daggers, cutting deeper with each punchline, but everyone pretends they're only tickling. Between barbs, the jester prances to the sheriff's side, whispering jokes that make the great man's face split with greasy delight. The sheriff slaps his thigh, wine sloshing from his goblet onto the table. You see him gesture toward the jester, an unspoken order to push harder. The jester's grin widens, eyes glittering with malice. He leaps back into the hall. The sheriff himself has a soft heart, he calls out with faux sweetness. So soft he lets the peasants live, just long enough to pay him again next season. The hall explodes with laughter, nobles pounding the tables, coins dancing across the wood. The sheriff roars, pleased, as if he's the hero of this sick comedy. You force your lips into a smile, praying it looks convincing. You try not to think about how many of the people laughing now will weep later, when the sheriff raises rents or demands new taxes. The jester's performance is a mirror reflecting your powerlessness. Everyone knows it, but tonight the mask of humour makes it feel like a game. The jester ends one routine by crawling along the floor, mimicking a peasant begging for bread. His voice quavers dramatically. Please, my lord, spare a crust, for my children haven't eaten in days. He slaps his hands together in pitiful prayer. A roar of laughter erupts from the high table, so loud it drowns out the quiet, real sobbing of a woman clutching her thin child further down the hall. The jester vaults upright, pirouettes, and points at a gaunt farmer near you. Or him, so dull he thinks a tax collector is a friend coming to visit. He doubles over cackling. The farmer gives a brittle laugh, eyes glassy. You glimpse his fists clenched white beneath the table, knuckles bone pale. He stares straight ahead, as if any movement might betray the rage seething inside him. A hush settles again as the jester slows his act. His voice turns soft, mocking sympathy. Ah, but without you peasants, who would feed us? Who would dig our ditches, sew our clothes, die quietly in your beds? The nobles murmur appreciation. You are the backbone of our realm, crooked, brittle, and easy to break. He ends with a flourishing bow, cap bells chiming a final, cruel note that echoes through the hall like the tolling of a funeral bell. A smattering of applause comes from the high table. Nobles wipe tears of laughter from their eyes. Merchants lean back with satisfied smirks, cheeks flushed with wine and arrogance. The sheriff rises slowly, clapping his massive hands, each slap deliberate, a thunderous punctuation. You keep your head bowed, pulse hammering. Around you, peasants shift uncomfortably, faces flushed with humiliation and fury they dare not show. The minstrels strike up a new tune, lively, bright, painfully out of place against the hollow silence settling over the lower tables. The sheriff raises his goblet high. "A fine performance," he declares. His gaze sweeps over the hall, lingering on the peasants like a cat considering which mouse to toy with next. "Remember, laughter is good for the soul, yours and mine." He drinks deeply. The jester lounges beside him, head resting on one hand, eyes darting over the crowd like a spider watching a fly caught in its web. The sheriff's men resume their patrol, scanning faces for signs of insolence. The candlelight wavers in the draughty hall, painting every wall with monstrous shadows. Your breath comes slow and ragged. You can almost hear your neighbors thinking what you think, that tonight's cruelty was a lesson, mockery as a tool of control, humiliation as a meal to feed the sheriff's ego. And beneath your fear, a kernel of cold, hard resolve begins to form. Because the jester's jokes may keep the nobles entertained, but they remind you too. One day, laughter will turn to rage, and the sheriff's hall will echo with a very different kind of sound. The feast drags on into the deep hours of the night. Outside the sheriff's hall, fog crawls through the streets like a living thing, muffling the final strains of drunken song drifting from the tall, arched windows. Inside, the tables sag under the weight of greasy platters, scraped bare, goblets tipped over in careless abandon, pools of wine staining the wood a dark, sticky red. The candles burn low, their flames trembling in sooty glass holders, casting an exhausted, flickering light over faces slack with food, drink, and fear. The sheriff's chest, once half empty, now bulges with coin purses, each stamped with the desperate mark of its owner. The guards have stacked it in the corner like a silent monument to a night of quiet terror. Each clink of shifting coins as it's locked closed sounds like the final, cold laugh of a man who knows he's already won. Servants pick through the debris of the feast, heads bowed, hands moving quickly to avoid the sheriff's glare. One servant knocks a goblet from the high table. It tumbles with a hollow clatter. The sheriff turns slowly, eyes narrow, but the man scrambles to set it right before the sheriff's lip curls into a smile that promises punishment. Satisfied, the sheriff shifts his gaze back to the hall, his eyes glassy with wine but still sharp enough to pierce armor. A few brave peasants and lesser merchants make quiet goodbyes, slipping from the hall as if hoping the sheriff will forget they were ever there. But the guards at the door watch them go with flat, reptilian eyes, noting each face, each name, each nervous glance. You move to rise too, but a heavy hand lands on your shoulder, a guard with breath like a dead goat, his fingers squeezing just enough to remind you who decides when you leave. The sheriff finally stands, swaying slightly. He raises his goblet, refilled by a servant who nearly trips in his haste, and his voice rolls across the hushed hall like thunder. "Tonight," he slurs with practiced grandeur, "we have renewed our bonds. You have shown your loyalty." He pauses, eyes roving over the crowd, voice softening dangerously. "And I have shown you my mercy." His words slither through the hall like cold fog, curling into every ear. The sheriff's gaze fixes on a fat merchant who only managed a paltry bribe. The merchant's face drains of colour. He babbles thanks and praises until the sheriff's smirk curls wider. Another lesson. Even gratitude must be performed convincingly. The sheriff signals his men. 2 guards heave the bribe chest to his feet with grunts of effort. The sheriff rests one boot on it, surveying the hall with the satisfaction of a man who's just been reminded exactly how much he owns. He tosses the jester a silver coin, which the fool catches in his teeth with a flourish that sparks ragged applause from the few nobles still conscious. "Enjoy your beds tonight," the sheriff announces, voice dropping to a low growl that cuts the fading laughter. "For tomorrow we return to work, and I will remember who slept soundly and who did not." The guests stand as one, benches scraping, each person desperate to avoid being the last to leave. You shuffle toward the door with the crowd, feet dragging on rushes now damp with spilled wine and congealed grease. Outside, the fog wraps around you like a damp shroud. The sheriff's guards herd guests into the square, eyes gleaming under the pale moonlight. No one speaks. Every cough, every nervous shuffle echoes like a drumbeat. Behind you, The great doors of the sheriff's hall slam shut with a resonant boom. The sound rolls through the square, vibrating in your bones. A final, heavy note sealing the night like a tomb. The walk home feels longer than usual. You pass darkened houses, windows shuttered, doors barred. Dogs howl in the distance, as if sensing the tremors of fear that ripple through the town. Your feet crunch over frosted mud, each step slow and heavy. You clutch your threadbare cloak tighter around your shoulders, the chill seeping into your bones. In the shadows of an alley, you catch sight of your neighbor leaning against a wall, eyes hollow, breath steaming in the cold. He sees you, manages a weak smile, but his eyes flick back to the sheriff's hall, burning in the distance like a watchful eye. Neither of you speaks. There's nothing to say that hasn't already been carved into your hearts tonight. At home, your family waits in darkness. They pounce on you with hushed questions. Did you pay the bribe? Did you anger the sheriff? Did you survive? You nod stiffly, trying to sound reassuring, though your mind is a haze of images. The jester's cruel grin, the sheriff's smouldering eyes, the chest swelling with coins like a bloated tick. That night, sleep doesn't come easily. Each time you close your eyes, you hear the jester's mocking voice, the sheriff's heavy boots on the dais, the cold chime of coins falling into the chest. You see the peasants' faces twisted in forced laughter, the merchants' eyes darting like trapped animals, the guards' casual cruelty. But in the restless hours before dawn, a thought worms into your mind, small, sharp, dangerous. You remember the look in the other peasant's eyes. Shame, yes, but something else too. A spark, a thin, trembling line of fury that even the sheriff's feast couldn't stamp out completely. Because a feast like this isn't just a display of power, it's a gamble. Each humiliation plants seeds in the hearts of those forced to smile. Each forced laugh grinds hope into rage. And though tonight the sheriff's hall stands unchallenged, tomorrow's dawn will come all the same. One day, you think as you drift into fitful sleep, the sheriff will feast again, and the laughter might sound different. One day, the coins he counts in candlelight may slip from his grasp. One day, the peasant's fear will curdle into something sharper than any dagger. But until then, you rise with the dawn, shoulder your burdens, and carry on. Because life under the sheriff's rule isn't just survival. It's learning to remember every slight, every sneer, every coin pressed into his palm, and knowing that one day it might be repaid. Sweet dreams, wanderers of stories.